Hi, I'm so happy you're all here for the book club. I'm Caroline Leavitt, and my book, of course, is Tomorrow. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the book and send you this little film because I can't be there with you. Um, this is my messy office. Uh, okay, anyway, Is This Tomorrow is a book that's set in the 1950s, and a lot of the book is about what it means to be an outcast. And it involves Ava Lark, who has very many strikes against her. She's Jewish, she's divorced, she works at a time when nobody gets divorced, not even celebrities. And women don't work, they stay at home and take care of the kids. And being Jewish was the same as being a communist, which in the 1950s was the worst possible thing you could be. So why did I write the book? Why am I so interested in outsiders? Well, you could say that I was a quintessential outsider myself. When I was 5 years old, my father moved us to the suburbs because he thought that was the great American dream. Now, we were the only Jewish family, this was in the 1960s, in a Waltham suburb that was filled with Christian families. And I can remember standing out front, seeing all these kids coming by, and I thought, great, I'm going to have people to play with me. And instead, they came closer to me and they said, hey, my parents said you killed Christ. Now, I was stunned. I had never killed anybody, and I was appalled that somebody would say that to me. And my mother said, don't worry, you'll make friends, things will get better. Well, they didn't. When I got to school, I learned that I had some friends that I had. They couldn't play with me because I was Jewish. When I was in junior high, there was something called the National Junior Honor Society. You had to have all A's to be in it. You had to have a lot of activities, and the big thing about it is you got to wear this big banner across your chest, this silver banner, and that's what I wanted more than anything. So I had all A's. I was in like a million things: chorus, drama club, Russian club, French club, all these different clubs. I was a shoo-in. But the day before the big celebration, the principal called me in his office and he said, I'm very sorry, Caroline, you're not going to be in the National Junior Honor Society. And I said, what? How can this be? And he said, well, it's your grades. And I said, but I have all A's. And he said, well, then maybe it's because you're not in enough activities. And I said, but I'm in 12 activities. And he said, it doesn't matter, you're not in, so let's just drop the subject. So I went home, I cried to my mother, and she said, something's not right. So she called up the school board and she said, you know, my daughter has all A's and she's got 12 activities and they're saying she can't be in the National Junior Honor Society. And the woman sighed and said, you know what, this happens every year and it's always with a Jewish child. And my mother said, well, what are you going to do about it? The woman said, there's nothing we can do. And back in the 60s, there wasn't. So the next day, I had to go to the ceremony. I wanted to watch my friends, and I was hoping I wouldn't cry. And this amazing thing happened. They walked across the stage, and they got those banners, and two of my friends took those banners off. And the principal started yelling at them, but they didn't listen. And they came down the stairs, and they took the banner off, and they put it right in my lap. It was an amazing thing. It was a totally amazing thing. But there was one family on my block which was which was actually more outcast than I was. This was a divorced woman, and she was divorced from a Boston Celtic, which of course was very bad in Boston. And she had two kids, a daughter named Annie and a younger son. Now, we kids were told not to go over her house because she was divorced. She used to sun herself in front of the house in a white bikini when all our moms wore these long skirted two-piece deals. And she had a lot of men over. They said the house was dirty, that things could get dangerous over there. Well, I never listened. I love that woman. She taught me how to wear mascara. She put nail polish on me. And Annie was my best friend. So one day Annie told me, you know what? I'm going to be adopted by this Jewish dentist and we're going to move out of town. And I said, what? You can't be adopted when you have a family. She said, yes, you can. And sure enough, 2 months later, her mother gave her up. She moved away with that dentist and his family. And I never saw her again. And 2 weeks later, the mother and the son left too. They left the house abandoned. And I remember I asked everybody, how could this happen? How could this happen? And the only thing they told me was, well, she was divorced. That's how it happens. So I started writing this story and I started putting in a missing child. And I set it in the 1950s because it was such a strange time where, supposedly it was like the best time where everybody had money and everybody had a house, a white picket fence. But actually there was a rumble of communism. And I had to do a lot of research, which I want to share with you. Most of my research I did by asking people on Facebook, can I talk to somebody who knows anything about the 50s? I found some really great people. I found a cop from the 50s who told me that in the 1950s when a child vanished, they didn't have milk cartons the way they do now or Amber Alerts. They would treat it like an adult vanishing, which meant that a kid could be missing for like 24 hours, which is too long for a child. I found one of the first male nurses in the 60s because Lewis, my character, becomes a male nurse. And I got great bits from this person. He told me that being a male nurse made him suspect because people wondered, like, why would a guy want to be a nurse? And they weren't so nice to him until he showed up at a dance with a girl. He also told me that doctors used to smoke all the time when they were examining patients. And not only that, the doctors would tell the patients, you should smoke too because it'll relax you. Some of the most interesting stuff that I researched had to do with food because Ava, my character, becomes a master chef. I found all these vintage cookbooks with names like Let's Jump It Up with Jello or Cooking with Coffee or Making Meals Men Like, because men weren't supposed to cook, of course. So I just want to share two of the recipes with you so you can get an idea of the kind of food in the 50s. One was called an overnight salad. Now to make an overnight salad, you chop up your lettuce, you add cucumbers, tomatoes, pour on a cup of Wesson oil, pour on a cup of mayonnaise, let it sit overnight, and then you serve it to your guests when it's a big soppy mess. The other recipe is called a meatloaf train. Now, meals were supposed to be showstoppers because women stayed home. What else did they have to do, people thought, so they should make these elaborate meals. Meatloaf train, you take your hamburger and you shape it so it looks like a train. Then you cut up carrots. The carrot wheels, you embed them in the meatloaf because those are the wheels. Then you cut up celery, and those are supposed to be the windows. And the final touch is you take a pea, and those are the passengers in the train. Now, the 1950s were full of fear about communism. People really believed that communists were going to destroy a country with atom bombs, steal our religion, take away our children, and there was a lot of paranoia. Magazines like Look magazine or Life magazine, very famous magazines, ran articles called How You Can Tell If Your Neighbor is a Communist. So I'm going to share some with you. Does your neighbor read a lot of books? Communist. Does your neighbor tell jokes and you don't understand the punchline? Probably code. Communist. There was so much fear about radiation going on, but there was also in the 50s a lot of belief that we could survive it. I found a pamphlet called We Can Survive a Nuclear Attack. They said keep your house tidy because tidy houses don't attract radiation. If you're out in the middle of a nuclear bomb and you have fallout all over you, just wipe it off, brush it off, and you'll be okay. It was a very, very strange time. I just want to end by telling you a little bit about how I became a writer, and I'll try to keep it short. I was that ostracized kid, and I also had asthma. So I was in the library a whole lot when other kids were playing. And I always asked the librarian, can you find me books about kids with asthma? Because I wanted to validate my experience. Well, she couldn't, but she gave me some books about pleurisy from Mrs. Mike, this great book about this woman that goes off to the Alaskan wilderness with her husband. And I learned about tuberculosis from 18th century novels. And I took those words with me. I remember when I was out on the playground, this boy came over and he was bullying me, calling me asthma head. And I drew myself up and I put my hands on my hips and I said, I beg your pardon. I don't have asthma. I have pleurisy and consumption. And his face got all red because he didn't know those words, and those words were exotic to him. Because of that, I was exotic. But I didn't want to just read books. I wanted to write them. And I started writing in class all the time. If I had to write a book report, I made up a book, and then I read about it, and then I wrote about it. And no teacher ever found out until I was a senior in high school, when the teacher was so enamored of the book I had made up that she went to the library to try to find it, and she couldn't. She didn't know whether to give me credit for being creative or to fail me. In the end, she gave me credit. So I started sending things out when I was in high school. Always rejection, rejection, rejection. And then I got to Brandeis. And there was one class I really wanted to take, which was taught by this guy named Alan Lelchik, who was this really famous writer. And you had to submit something to get in the class. And I did. And I wrote across the top, "You cannot not let me be in this class. I have to be in this class." And he let me in. So the first day of class, there were 15 of us. We were all really scared. And he held up my paper like this. And he made a face like this. He said, "Today we are going to discuss this garbage that is Miss Leavitt's." The boy next to me gasps. The woman next to me stayed still. I didn't know what to do. So I just sat there very still while he tore it apart and talked about how stupid it was. I felt the tears come down my face, but I didn't leave. I stayed for the whole class. And at the end of the class, he told me, "You'll never make it." And I said, "Yes, I will. You wait." So I got out of college. I had to have a job. I didn't know what to do. Every job I took, I was fired from. I was fired at an answering service because I kept giving the calls from Mrs. Foote, the podiatrist, to Dr. Foote, the obstetrician. I had a job at American Publish Company, which made dirty puzzles, and I left after I started noticing that a lot of the people working on these machines were missing fingers, and they were getting their hair cut in the glue press. I came home totally depressed, thinking, what am I going to do with my life? I'm not a writer. I can't have a job. I saw this big brown envelope in my mail. Those brown envelopes always mean you've sent out stories, they've come back to you. They're rejections. I couldn't face another rejection. So I ripped that up in a million pieces, and the pieces flew all over my porch like confetti. And then I looked down, and I saw one word: congratulations. I put all those pieces together, and it turned out I had won a contest, $7,000. They were going to publish my story. I was going to get an agent. Shortly after that, my first novel, Meeting Rosie Halfway, was published. I got a great review in the New York Times. I took that book and the review, and I sent it to my professor at Brandeis saying, "See, I told you I could do it." He wrote back and he said, "Well, I just wanted you to have a stiffer spine," but I knew that he didn't really mean that. So I thought, my career's made, everything's going to be great. Then my publisher went out of business. Then my next publisher went out of business. When my third publisher went out of business, just when my book came out, I began to wonder, is it me maybe? So I had my agent sign me with a really big publisher, 3-book deal, and they did nothing, and the books died. So I got another publisher, another 3-book deal. First 2 books, they did nothing, no publicity. They didn't even send the books out, and the books died. By this time, I was on my 9th novel, and that was Pictures of You. And I was writing it, and I thought, okay, I think it's an okay book. I sent it to my agent, and she said, "This is fabulous. This is your breakout book." Then I got a phone call from my editor who said, "Caroline, we're not going to publish this. It isn't special." And I said, "What? What do you mean it isn't special? Can I make it special?" She said, "No. We don't think you can." And I said, "What if I write another book? Will that be special?" And she said, "No, we don't think it will be either." I didn't know what to do. I felt like my career was over and no publisher was going to take somebody with 8 failed novels. So I called my friends crying. And one of my friends said, "I have an editor at Algonquin Books. Maybe she'll like this." And you know what? She did. And she bought it. And everybody at Algonquin came together and they said, "We can make this book a bestseller." And I said, "Excuse me, do you know who you're talking to? I've had 8 failed novels." And they said, No, you watch us." They did. I got on the New York Times bestseller list and the USA bestseller list. That book got on the best books of 2011 from San Francisco Chronicle and Kirkus Reviews and all sorts of places. And they bought Is This Tomorrow? And they bought my next book, Cruel, Beautiful World, which is set in the 1970s and is due to come out in probably 2015. So it just goes to show you, I'm the poster girl for second chances. If any of you have anything that you really want to do, don't take no for an answer. Just remember me. The final thing I want to say is that if any of you have any questions about the book or complaints or comments, let me know. I'm at carolinelevitt@gmail.com, and I'd love to hear from readers. I'm so sorry I couldn't have been at your club, but I'm really happy that I got to have this film. Hope you have a good night. Bye.